Yo, right here I have the successor to probably the most popular gaming mice to exist. I've been using the Superlight 2 for a few weeks, and today I'm putting it up against its most obvious contender, the Viper V2 Pro. Both will run you $160, so by the end of this video, you'll know which of these two deserve your hard-earned money. The Viper weighs in at 59 grams, and Logitech shut off just enough for the new Superlight to come in at the same. Although, if you take off the puck, you can drop off a gram and a half from that total. Previously, the Superlight weighed 63 grams, which was never enough of a difference to make a decision over. Once you go sub 70 grams or so, you start to get serious diminishing returns. At this point, the glide of the mouse becomes much less about the weight and more so about its feet. When I compared the V2 Pro to the original Superlight, the biggest issue I had was with its shitty mouse feet. I later ended up buying these Tiger Ice skates off Amazon to replace them, which made a significant difference to the glide of the mouse. For $10, it was an absolute no-brainer. I expected Logitech to make some sort of changes here, and they did, but not in the way that I expected. They made an incredibly tiny change, seemingly just to fuck with anyone who already bought a pair of third-party skates. They left the front piece exactly the same, but at the back where it wraps around the puck, they changed it ever so slightly to be more of a U-shape instead of circular. The material, however, is completely unchanged. It's the same scratchy PTFE from the original. Because of this change, any third-party skates you own aren't going to fit properly. We're just now starting to see options become available. Pulsar sent me their glass feet, and so far I'm really liking these. I wouldn't recommend them to everyone, but if you use your mouse solely for gaming, they may be worth a try. The reason that I mention this is the glass makes the mouse much more slippery than usual, so trying to grab onto small buttons is a pain. Once they start to break in, they just make the mouse glide smoothly, which for tracking-based games is a plus. I'm still using these stock feet with the Viper V2 Pro. I find them to be pretty damn good. They don't have that same scratchy feelings the Superlight do, and they're smooth enough for both sniping and tracking-based games. One of the only other changes the Superlight 2 had was the addition of USB-C. This is a great quality of life improvement, as the original was the only device I still had with micro USB. You'll also have to charge a little less frequently. The battery life got a bump from 70 hours to 95. The V2 Pro still sits around the 70-hour range, but with how quickly the mice charge, this shouldn't be a deciding factor. The shape is ultimately where I consider 80% of the decision to be made. My opinion has changed pretty drastically with time. These days, I much prefer using the Superlight with its rounder, raised shape. The grip style I have is what I would describe as a cross between claw and fingertip, and this taller build is more comfortable for that. The Viper's flatter shape is a noticeable difference that just isn't as comfortable to rest my hand on. COD is the game I play the most, just because when I don't have much time, I can quickly jump on and shit on some kids. The Viper is my pick for run-and-gun gameplay, but the Superlight is always my go-to when sniping. When it comes to comfort, shape will always have the biggest impact, but coding for me is a very close second. Razer does a great job with theirs. The grippy texture feels good to rest your fingers on, and it's just enough that it doesn't feel slippery nor stiff. The Superlight 2 still has that same smooth plastic coating, which does feel good in the hand, but the mouse buttons are a little slippery. The most drastic improvement Logitech made was swapping the Omron switches for their own optical ones. One of my favorite things about the Viper was its optical switches. I still think Razer's win, but I've been very impressed with these. They have a very crisp sound and give noticeable tactile feedback. If you're accustomed to the Omrons, these are going to be a significant change. They're heavier than the Vipers and will require you to press down a little harder than before. It's nothing drastic. I can click just as quick as with the previous switches, and honestly prefer these requiring more force. So the Viper side buttons remain superior. The Superlight 2 is still using those same mushy switches as before, which makes getting at them more of a pain. They just have significant pre-travel that makes them feel low quality. Razer actually has proper switches underneath them that give a similar level of tactile feedback to the mouse buttons. Now, the Razer scroll wheel has always been something I gave it shit for. It has a rattly sound and inconsistent steps. The Superlight's was always better, but it was updated with a small amount of lubing. It's a subtle difference here, but each step is less snappy and makes for a smoother scroll overall. The last area worth touching on is the sensor. The Superlight's Hero 2 sensor is an improvement to the original, with the main difference being its 2000Hz polling rate. Compared to the Viper's 1000Hz, I've honestly not noticed any difference. Even on a 240Hz monitor, I'm not confident I could pick between these two. Some reviewers have given these Superlight shit for not having a 4000Hz polling rate, and while I've only played a single game with the Model D2 Pro, that was again just not a noticeable enough difference that I'd consider it a real selling point. If you're a competitive player, this may be something you'd notice, but for me, as a very casual gamer, this just isn't where I'm putting my money. So, which of these two mice deserve your money? Recently, I've honestly been leaning towards the Superlight, mainly for the shape. After spending so much time with it, I find it more comfortable to fit into my hand. That's 80% of the reason that I'm maining it at the moment. If you have a claw or palm grip, or in other words, you just want a mouse that you can more so rest your hand on, the Superlight is a great pick. However, because this updated version is still so similar to its predecessor, buying the original right now actually isn't a bad idea. If you have a fingertip grip or want a mouse with a lower profile, I can recommend the Viper. I hope this video was helpful, and if it was, subscribe because next week we're looking at the latest addition to my gaming setup. I'll see you then. Take care.